Right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So today we have a webinar that is titled Improve Customer Experience, or CX, across channels by leveraging localization AI. My name is JP Barraza. I am the CEO of the Americas for SYSTRAN. And SYSTRAN is a machine translation provider, pure player in the industry for more than 54 years now. And I am very excited here to have as our guest on this webinar, Ronald Egle, who is Content Systems Administrator for Ariel Corporation. And I'm going to let Ron go ahead and introduce himself as I put the agenda on the slide here.
Hi, I'm Ron Egle. I'm the Content Systems Administrator at Ariel Corporation. So my job is primarily dealing with all of our translation and our technical communications.
Wonderful, wonderful. I really want to thank Ron for joining us, and he's got a really interesting customer story, and we're going to cover that today, and that's really going to be one of the focus of this webinar, and really talking about how we get to using advanced localization AI to really help the customer experience journey. In the webinar today, we're going to cover a few key topics. I'm going to start just with a little bit of a brief on AI and machine translation, and talk about a little bit about the differences, a little bit about the hype words that are in the industry, and what's real right now. We'll then go into Ariel Corporation's journey. We'll talk also about using advanced AI as well as humans in the loop. And finally, we'll round it out with a discussion about a technology that SYSTRAN provides for proven AI localization. We call it neural fuzzy adaptation. So to get started here, I just wanted to talk briefly about AI and machine translation. And throughout the webinar, you'll see a few polls actually pop up. So on your screen, you should see a message about a poll, and you go ahead and take that poll, and we'll have the results in the background. So AI and machine translation. AI is definitely one of the most buzzworthy and hyped words of the last I'd say decade or so, and it probably seems to be for the going future. Machine translation itself has existed just about as long as people have been talking about AI. So 1940s, 1950s is when machine translation really started getting going. The technology, though, was vastly different to what we have today, using machine learning models applied to machine translation. Those really started to come into production in around 2016. So the current era of machine translation based on AI really began around 2016. There certainly have always been early adopters versus late adopters. We've seen typically in the industries that are more apt to be early adopters, were more tech forward, more tech savvy industries where they were really trying to push the envelope. So you had a lot of the technology companies being early adopters here. But there's also the content type. So the kinds of content that you were looking to translate, and whether or not you should push those through a machine or a fully human process. Now this year, we've also had a lot of buzz and a whole new acronym that most people understand, which is LLM, large language model. And I just wanted to give a quick brief on that. Is that machine translation and neural machine translation models are large language models. They're a form of large language model that has been used for a very specific task, and that task is translation. The large language models that everyone is talking about these days are things like ChatGPT or Bard from Google. And those models were really designed to be interactive, chat-based models for people to ask questions and have a feedback or an answer from the system. So, Ron, what is some of your sort of your experience with adopting AI in NLP technologies for localization?
I think, as with most companies, Ariel had a slight hesitation with accuracy. Is MT going to be accurate enough? But then again, everyone has used Google Translate, and they've seen the amazing and the awful translations it can provide. but overall it works. And it offers a perspective on AI that management can understand. So we built on that understanding to introduce the SYSTRAN neural machine translation. And that was our solution, that we can provide specific translation models, targeted to Ariel's content translation needs, and kind of overcome the concern about accuracy.
Yeah, and I'd like to say, many years ago, and I've had over 20 years of experience in this industry, and many years ago the question was whether it should be used or not, and that being machine translation in the localization process. I'd argue that today it's more a matter of, if you're not using it, why not? Because it's definitely been shown and proven now to be a productivity enhancer. One other thing that's I want to just point out is a big difference between what you see with the LLMs that have emerged this year and large language models that are specific to the task of neural machine translation or machine translation, is that control. So one of the drawbacks that you get with LLMs is loss of control. The possibility that the system may hallucinate, might produce something that's completely out of bounds, and there's really not been developed sort of guardrails. What you get with neural machine translation is a very controlled output that you can absolutely improve, but you understand that it's not going to, let's say, produce content that's not part of your translation process. So that being said, I actually want to dig a little further into Ariel Corporation and really dig into Ron's story, because I think this is really the interesting area. So Ron, first of all, tell us a little bit about your company, about Ariel Corporation. Is it something related to The Little Mermaid?
No, Ariel Corporation has nothing to do with mermaids. Oop,
what about the laundry detergent?
No, we have nothing to do with laundry detergent that's made in Europe. Ariel is the largest manufacturer of separable reciprocating gas compressors worldwide. Our compressors are utilized by the global energy industry to extract, process, transport, store, and distribute natural gas from the wellhead to the end user. Can you move the slides a little bit? Are we stuck on the slide deck?
No, I think it's on. It's showing your founder here.
Oh, okay. I'm a little bit behind. Sorry on that.
Apologize if there's a lag.
So Ariel is the quintessential American entrepreneurial company. It was started in our founder's basement in 1966. And over 5 decades later, the third generation leads our family-owned business, which employs over 1,500 workers in multiple facilities across Ohio, with compressors in over 100 countries worldwide. So our journey into machine translation started in 2018 when we began the groundwork for our content conversion to Adobe Experience Manager. We had conducted some content analysis, and we identified some pretty significant customer experience problems. The first being, we had translated content that was never accessed. And this kind of aided in our case for machine translation. We also had to question our use of language microsites. And when I say a microsite, what it was is we had mini versions of our website that contained about 20% of the content. And that was the content that was deemed critical by management for our customers. And what we found was only 40% of the language users were using the language sites. The majority were using the English sites, the English language sites, and our regional offices were kind of reporting back to us that when they visited customers, they'd find customers actually using Google Translate on our website to translate it for them. So their question back to us was, well, why can't we? Yeah, why can't we use machine translation and show our entire site? So
Yeah,
that helped us. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, Ron, and how did you feel about them sort of, then your end users or your potential customers having to figure out the translation piece on their own? Was anyone very happy about that?
Well, no, and it's going both ways, because kind of what we determined when the full site wasn't translated, it demonstrated on our part a lack of brand commitment. So in building the new website in Adobe Experience Manager, we wanted to make sure that we had all the pages of the website translated. So it became pretty clear to us that we needed to investigate machine translation as a solution to these customer experience problems. So we evaluated SYSTRAN, DeepL, and Microsoft Translate. Pretty much because in working with XTM, those were kind of the companies that they suggested to look at. So we sent content samples, which was pretty, so our content samples, we chose some pretty difficult content to translate. And we picked it out of
manufacturing instructions. I see some engineering reference here, customer documentation. What was the content type?
Yeah, it was more of our heavy duty technical content mixed with some of the tricky marketing. So we wanted to get a taste was, can the machine translation handle both?
Right.
So we sent each vendor the sample content. It was all exactly the same. And we had our regional offices evaluate what they returned to us. And hands down, all 3 regional offices, selected SYSTRAN as the most accurate translation, machine translation. So
Great.
it was pretty apparent.
You actually had your in-country teams or your regional offices that deal with those particular languages do some of the evaluation, which I do want to point out is very key, right? Because you're engaging, the people within your company who are going to most benefit as well from this content being translated better, and also just so that they can actually advance your business needs, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it was really important.
Yeah, just one follow-up question on that, Ron, and sorry, I apologize for interjecting here. As a company, did this initiative of, okay, these are the customer experience issues that we've identified. Now let's look for a solution. Did you have executive sponsorship, executive backing on undergoing this project, or did you have to build that up with the business case as well?
Our vice president of international had a very good sense of this, so it was actually pretty easy for us to go ahead. We talked about these customer experience problems with him, and we gave him an outline of what we wanted to do, and management was 100% behind us. So wonderful, in our case, no, it didn't take much convincing to get the job done.
Well, that's great to hear. Sometimes you have good backing, as you said, and sometimes it's more difficult. So absolutely, it's great that you did have that support from your executive team. And if not, obviously, these are some of the key factors that you can build to build that case for them, right?
Exactly. So in getting ready for deployment, our first phase in our AEM conversion was to do our public marketing site. So we wanted to get that done in all 3 languages. So we went ahead and purchased an on-premise SYSTRAN server license, and we worked with Philip Strager to set up the server, and he taught us how to, how to use it and maintain the server software. Then we sent our TMs and our term-based files to SYSTRAN to help build the translation models. And they were just so excellent at working with us and getting them tweaked. And the process went fairly quickly. So we were ready for translation. And so our plan for the marketing site was that all the third level and below content would be translated using MT. But this included a human in the loop machine translation approach, meaning we had post editing. So we had humans, overlooking it, looking for glaring errors, making sure our brand voice was correct, style and consistency was all there. So by early 2021, we had our language sites launched.
That's great.
And
yeah, and let me just put a little bit of maybe understanding and color on some of these terms for those that are unfamiliar and possibly that are in our audience viewing. A translation memory is a previously translated phrase or sentence that normally has been validated by a human. And so they're considered sort of like gold previous translations. And term-based files are glossaries or terminology. So for example, you've got terminology or glossaries that are key to your business or your business's terms. So those can be used to enhance and customize on the system for your translation needs. But sorry about that, Ron, go ahead and continue on the results now.
Yeah, just finishing up on the TMs and term bases, those files are so important because, especially for our industry, in the energy industry, there's so many specific or unique terms to the industry, and getting, the translation of those figured out, we worked on that for years. So that information was gold and is very important to us. So, that was one thing with building the translation models was, I guess, machine translation can overcome people translation was, say for terms, for instance, some of our you get a different translator and, they wouldn't always use the terminology or look up the terminology like we'd want them to. Where machine translation,
you pointed out something very important too, that you had this from work you had been doing for years, right? So as
correct.
you use, let's say, an external agency, they're doing translation work for you. Maybe it's purely, maybe you're doing purely human translation in the past. Well, they're building up a body of knowledge that really is yours because these are your translations that you've purchased, right? So you have these translation memories. And then you spoke of the other thing that's very important, I think, that for people is the consistency of terminology application, right? If you have different translators, if you have different groups looking at it, people generally can choose different ways of translating something. One thing with machine translation is consistency.
Absolutely. And, that's what we found. Upon evaluating the performance of our new language sites, we found our CX strategy worked. Our Spanish sessions were up 47%. Our Chinese sessions were up 132%. Russian sessions were down 11%, but remember, we had a Russian conflict going on. So that's influenced that very much. But what was really important is 84% of the language users are accessing the native language website. And that's up 82%, and that's a giant improvement. So we flipped it around. We went from people not using these micro language sites to people using the full translated language site.
Yeah, those are amazing results, exactly. And really getting at the core of what's been put into research and polls after poll, right, is that people definitely prefer looking at content or receiving content in their own language. Even if there are some imperfections, they vastly prefer seeing it in their native language.
Exactly. And we do our best to minimize, those imperfections to that.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of like where you've got this implementation, you've got these great early results, and now it's looking at, all right, let's do even more, let's get even better. So I think that brings us into, sort of how this then impacted your productivity flow, right? About reducing, the amount that humans have to do with the same, or less localization spend, but also continuing to perform and increase your output of translation, right? So talk us through that, if you will, Ron.
Yeah. Yeah, so, basically we kind of have two translation models going. The first being what we call primary or necessity or important content that needs to be translated. And that's where we have we have humans, doing the translating. But we start out, as the workflow goes, we start out sending it from Adobe Experience Manager. We check the translation memory for TM matches, and then it goes to into the edit mode for our translators. And MT is used in the background there to help them. It aids in pre-translating it, and they can edit that or redo it as they feel necessary. And then after that's done, we run quality assurance checks to make sure. First, it goes to the regional offices for review, and then it goes back to the translators, to make sure that any changes they made, are correct, and it's ready for publication then.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those that joining the webinar that are perhaps unfamiliar, yes, Adobe Experience Manager is a content management system that's used to run websites. So lots of content, could be various languages, all that web content. XTM there in the next step for Ron's team is a translation management system, really used to manage the whole localization process and engage with the translators or post editors that will then work on the content. And XTM as a translation management system has a direct integration and connection with SYSTRAN.
Yeah, and pretty much XTM works really well with Adobe Experience Manager. It integrates well with that, and that was one of the main reasons we chose it. And then, SYSTRAN's integration into it is very unique, as you'll see in our upcoming slides here.
Yeah. So here on the apologize if you hear my Siri there in the background. If the traditional method, of course, as Ron said too, is that you're searching for translation memory matches, and what that means is that a partial, or what in the industry is known as a fuzzy match. So maybe part of the sentence matches what you already have in your translation memory database, and then it pulls that data so that it doesn't get retranslated. But really, I think, Ron, you then, around the same time as our researchers were doing some research into this, had a question about, can we do more? And that really brings us into the next phase, which is what we call the road to NFA, or what's known as neural fuzzy adaptation at SYSTRAN. So talk us a bit through this, what you thought about and what you asked us at that time.
Well, going back to our process where we're saying, hey, we have So we have machine translation going in. It's making mistakes, but we're correcting them. So my question was, hey, if I have these people fixing the mistakes the machine translation's making, can't we come up with some kind of way using APIs or something that could send those corrections back into SYSTRAN to kind of self-teach itself? And you know, I was expecting a no, we can't do that yet, but it was more of a, hey, we're working on something, just wait and see. And that's exactly the period when SYSTRAN was working with XTM to incorporate NFA into XTM and create an AI enhanced TM product. And SYSTRAN was just great to work with. So in anticipation for that, they said, hey, you know, those models, those translation models we built for you, send them back to us. We're gonna upgrade them into large data models. And once those got sent back and we started using them, we noticed an immediate improvement in the MT accuracy. And you know, then it was like, well, wait till you see what XTM has. So in 2021, XTM released version 12.7 with NFA. And that offered an AI method in which XTM uses SYSTRAN to analyze the 84 to 75% fuzzy match segments. And then it would complete the translation without human intervention. So Ariel's one of the first companies to get this implemented. And just to give you an idea, MT accounted for 17% of our overall translation in 2020. And when I'm saying 17%, I don't mean we were only doing 17% of our content in machine translation. Those were the segments, 17% were the segments that weren't touched by humans. So the machine translation was 100% accurate and we didn't have to do anything. In 2021, when we got the new models, we reduced our human translation efforts by 15%. And the quality of our MT translation went up by 64% in the first 4 months. And again, that was because of those large data models. Then XTM in April introduced the NFA, and we reduced our human translation efforts by 31% and improved our MT translation quality by 100%. So JP, I have to say that NFA was a pretty effective offering, and that XTM incorporated into their product. You know, for us, it increased the value of our translation assets, you know, that we all had stored in our TM. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and your results are definitely impressive, and I'd say, you know, wonderful. And we've also seen, you know, a consistent, you know, improvement of results across customers when they do implement. And yeah, and I'll dig in a little bit to the tech of NFA itself and in a few minutes, but just wanted to touch on the point that, you know, obviously you saw an evolution there, right? So you have your initial implementation, it's improving your productivity, improving your process, maybe decreasing your time to complete your translation jobs. Then, you know, we upgraded, we, you know, worked with you to upgrade your models, add your content, create larger versions of those machine models, which already before implementing the NFA technology had improved your productivity, increased your quality, improved your productivity with human translation efforts. And then neural fuzzy adaptation, or AI enhanced TM, as XTM calls it within their system, really brought you to another level above that, which is wonderful to see. I mean, an NT quality increase by 100% is amazing. And also just that consistency and really you touched on it, and I'll dig a little bit deeper into it in a few minutes, but absolutely taking more advantage of the content you already have in your previously translated content, which is your translation memories. So, and just to give everyone a bit of a visual, and there's a new poll that's opening. So, let me see. Yeah, so there you should see a poll pop up, and go ahead and take that poll when you see it on your end. And I also just want to mention, while we have this poll open, that there are also a couple of handouts available to you through the webinar platform. So we have a SYSTRAN Ariel case study document, which really digs into the Ariel Corporation use case that we definitely recommend that you download and read more on the detail of that. And also a nice video about Ariel Corporation itself so that you can learn about them. We've also added there a language catalog of SYSTRAN so you can see the language coverage that we have. So yeah, to give a bit of a visual reference to everybody about this workflow and the process, we have this diagram about the process that Ron just described. So really what he's talking about is the content management system, in his case being Adobe Experience Manager, sending the English content, a document, content that's been written in English into their XTM system. Their XTM translation management system then processes that data with their integration with Adobe Experience Manager, which is a nice and tight integration. And XTM itself is then taking advantage of SYSTRAN services and solution through their connection with us and their AI enhanced TM. So we work with XTM very closely to develop these advanced integrations so that they can take advantage of our more bleeding edge technologies such as neural fuzzy adaptation. The results are sent back into XTM so that the translators themselves, or let's say in-country reviewers for Ariel, can review the content and do some post-editing. Maybe it's light post-editing, maybe it's heavy, maybe it's just validating that the output from the system is good enough to keep and they don't have to do anything else. And then it goes to another process of client review, I think in this case being, for Ron's case being maybe those regional offices, those in-country offices that are dealing with those languages. And of course, a QA step just to make sure the quality is there before publishing it to their live sites. So Ron, anything else that I may have missed there on describing your translation process here?
No, very well described. What I have to say, what's really nice about the XTM platform is everything is truly integrated together. And that flow you're seeing from when I start a project, it's basically I hit the start button, there goes the project, bam, it comes back and it's all translated. So as someone who has to handle the translation process, I don't have to do anything. Everything, once I hit the button, the whole process takes care of itself. And XTM has the workflows that, assign the work to the translators, assigns, the work to the reviewers, and sends reminders, when that work needs to get done. So we have a pretty efficient process and things get turned around really quickly.
Yeah, and I really do think this is all about enhancing your capability, right? So you are able to do so much more through great workflow integrations and process automation versus having to manually track all these things and maybe try to track projects via email, right?
Oh, yeah, I won't go into our older process. I mean, we literally before this had like a 31-step process with all manual file handling. So it took 2 of us full time, pretty much to manage it and get things done.
Now you actually have time to think more about the business impacts and improvements versus the minutia of managing the process itself, right?
Well, yeah, and as you see right here, the process you have on is for our critical content, and that's the full system where, everything is, checked by a translator, checked by our regional offices, and then rechecked, by our language service provider. And what's important to note here is for our translators, the MT provides predefined translations to news segments, and that helps reduce their post-editing time. And now with the AI enhanced TM, and we had a lot of these, we have a lot of segments that are within that 99 to 70% fuzzy match range. Well, all that editing's gone. And that's that tedious editing, where it's like everything's the same, but these two little words.
Yeah.
Or the only thing that changed was the product model. So that all that, tedious editing tasks are gone. So to me, I mean, that's what makes AI so wonderful is, when it's taking care of the stuff we really don't like doing and handles that for us. So, for me, I look at it is we've increased our integrity per translator, by replacing that mundane, repetitive work. And it gives them more time for the creative work that really demonstrates their talents. So we could put the human translators on that really tough content that's really, hard to understand. And it's, their skill to, properly translate it.
Absolutely. And as everything is a continuous improvement process, and you as a company are coming up with advanced upgrades to your content, upgrades to your products, it's also about continuous development in your management of the content, right? So let's talk about a little bit about what you're working on now.
Well, again, SYSTRAN helping us be ahead of the XTM developments was earlier this year. We worked on updating our Chinese translation models, and SYSTRAN took those, updated them, and our blue scores went from 64 to over 81. So that was up 17 points. And we did that ahead of the XTM release of version 13.3, which now could use the AI enhanced TM feature to translate Chinese. So we were missing that, for over a year and a half now, and that's going to be a really big enhancement for us. And the greatest improvement made here was there was a restraint that XTM had that only fuzzy matches, from a certain percentage could be translated, and that has been removed. So all fuzzy matches are going to SYSTRAN, which helps improve our MT on the fly. And it was just released earlier this summer. And of course, summer slows down and projects get a little bit slower. So we haven't had as much translation as we will in the upcoming months. But we're already seeing NFA usage, increasing dramatically, meaning, our machine translation taking over that human translation, in a lot of the, slight edit projects that we have, which is quite a few. And I guess our next move here is we just purchased Model Studio. So we're looking to kind of keep that self-improvement going on, that we take, again, that we could take the TM content and keep updating our models on our machine translation models on a continuous basis, which is what, I originally asked for a couple years ago. So, we're really excited about that. And we want to move our quality from a human in the loop to an expert in the loop, meaning that they can help modify our MT output rules and, based on previous translations, and get our MT results, as high as we can get them. So that's what we have in the works right now.
There's a lot of great stuff. Yeah, and just also to give our audience a little bit of I'd say anchors here. When you mentioned the blue is a automatic metric that's used in the machine translation space, and increases in that score basically increases in automatic performance checks. And yeah, seeing a 17-point improvement in Chinese is pretty huge. That took advantage of new developments in our large language models, but also the AI enhanced TM for sure. I'll talk a little bit about the fuzzy matches here in a minute. And Model Studio is our self-service training platform so that customers can train custom neural models themselves using their data. And that's the point where, Ron's team, can take advantage of the language model work that has already been done for them in the past by SYSTRAN, and now they themselves can continue to improve those neural models without SYSTRAN's direct assistance. They can manage the process themselves. So talking about NMT and human in the loop, and of course, as you mentioned, then the next step being expert in the loop. I just wanted to switch gears here a little bit and just say, how really that's the way, the future way that all of this work is going to be done. A lot of this buzz that's been created has really made people think much more about, using machine translation in their process. We've been calling it neural machine translation, or NMT, since that technology sort of took hold in 2016. Basically, it's the de facto now, though, for many years. So we can really just probably call it machine translation again, or MT. But human in the loop is the fact that you're going to have somewhere in that workflow process, a human reviewing the most critical content that, shouldn't go out with any level of error or a very minimal level of error. And that's where Ron was, demonstrating in their high value translation process. They go through the full loop that goes through human translation, post-editing, human review, QA, and then gets published. Now, of course, really with these advances in these tools that are meant to enhance the human's work, we're really talking about not eliminating, humans' contribution. The human translator's contribution is absolutely critical here because it's their feedback and that continuous loop that actually helps improve our machine translation systems. So we really see the human as our tools as augmenting the human's productivity and the human's work as improving the machine translation. So, I mean, we talk about a couple of high-level things here, time, budget, and resources. Usually some of the biggest constraints when you're looking at projects, especially time. I don't know, Ron, if you can comment on what it would take time-wise to complete a human translation or a human-only or your previous, 30-plus step process to complete a translation project to get it to production versus now with using technology and automation, how much productivity gain there in terms of time have you been able to improve? If you could just think about that from off the top of your head.
Well, it's huge when you get into in our old process, all our file handling was manual, so we manually, sent the files to the translation company. They manually came back, and those had to be imported, into the authoring system and so forth. So that time, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's, the numbers are huge.
Yeah, days or weeks.
Exactly.
Versus hours, right? Yeah, minutes or hours.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
yes.
And all of that improvement
so
is also
we're translating things a lot faster. Yeah, we're translating things, kind of we're at the point now where we're translating faster than our reviewers can handle. And we have some problems in that, but those are the good kind of problems to have.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have people just waiting idly by for you to provide them the work to do, right? So that's great. So I'm going to touch briefly on neural fuzzy adaptation at a high level. Okay, this is not a very technical webinar, and we've got technical papers and technical webinars for anyone that's looking to deep dive into our technology. But what neural fuzzy adaptation is, in essence, is us taking those previously translated sentences that are either purely human translated or have been post-edited, validated by humans, and now stored in your translation memory database. We're taking those as all as suggestions. We're feeding those in real time to the SYSTRAN neural machine translation system. And in real time, the SYSTRAN neural machine translation system is adapting its translation output based on those various potential inputs. So we take similar sentences, we feed them all to the SYSTRAN system, along with the new sentence that you're trying to translate. Our system on the fly looks at those similar sentences, whether they're a very small percentage match of the sentence or a larger, and it adapts itself on the fly for the translation. So really, you're gaining almost a custom neural machine translation a benefit without having to customize it. So this is built on top of our generic machine model, our generic language model. Now, the next step, of course, is that you then incorporate your own linguistic assets like terminology, translation memories. That's already also enhancing the translation output because we're also using those in the real time. So using your previously translated sentences, your terminology to ensure that we have consistency in the translation output, that we're using the right terms for oil and gas, for example, for compressors, versus terms that should be more, for consumer goods. And the system uses all of this to enhance itself on the fly. The next level, which Ron mentioned briefly there, is then actually customizing a model using our Model Studio product. And there you can actually take that feedback that's already been done, the extra maybe light post editing or heavier post editing that your translators did, feed that back into our system and actually run a machine learning cycle on that content. And very quickly, within a few hours, it will produce a new version of our language model that has been completely customized using your content. So really what you're looking at is I would say, a really steep curve up of quality potential using these technologies. The next, what I'd say in terms of, coverage is, what kind of content can you put into these different types of processes? Now, there's still a whole lot of content that goes untranslated just because of cost, because of time, because of those other constraints like resources, right? This is a simple little demonstration here of the kinds of content that you might see sort of more heavily localized with humans, put into that full localization process versus the other content that may either not get translated because there's no budget, or there's very small budget for it, or there's not really any time or resources to assign to it. So at the top there, let's say the top of the iceberg here, you've got content localization, marketing material, product packaging, things that you really want to make sure are very much, they're key to being localized in order to do business in another market, in another language, right? Sometimes marketing content as well needs to be transcreated, meaning that it's getting rewritten for a target market because it really is a very different pitch in that market. But then what you see here, let's say below the waterline, is all the other types of content as well that don't necessarily get touched or are not thought about. So there's customer service and support. Ron's case is a great use case there, showing that documentation, all of that content, it needs to also be available in another language. If a customer's buying it in their own language, they also want to be supported in their own language. And machine translation is a wonderful tool for adding that. And experts in the loop actually can help improve that content through that feedback as well. So on the customer service and support side, you can integrate machine translation for your real-time chat, for your ticketing systems, for your knowledge bases. There's also a lot of content and sensitive documentation that you maybe don't want to send out, or also have to consider, what is the system you're sending it to. So Ron, I know that in your case, you guys you have an on-premises version of SYSTRAN, meaning that our SYSTRAN server runs inside of your your computer data center, your network, you control it fully. None of your content gets sent outside of your area, so you can maintain intellectual property. And I'm sure that was part of the calculus for you, really, is in protecting the sanctity and the security of the content you're translating, which is not yet publicly known. Am I right there, Ron?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of our content is proprietary, and even our technical support is all done through a member login system. So this information is, really important to us. It's important. It's an important business asset, that really needs to be protected. And I have to say, the SYSTRAN on-premise server is just so easy to manage. Updates come in automatically, and it's a push of a button to implement them. And our translation resource files are constantly updated. It's not like once or twice a year. It's once or twice a month. They're constantly being updated and improved.
Yeah, and that's really key, is that these things are advancing so much, and we have large teams working on improving language models, and so it's important to be able to continuously update, even if you are putting it in your own secure data center. So absolutely one of the key points. I'm going to leave a few minutes here for questions, but before we do that, I do want to say that we have a special offering for the webinar attendees. Model Studio, which is our self-service customization platform solution. With that, we are offering a free model training for any customers that sign up and that have viewed this webinar. Just reach out to our team following the webinar. There will be some contact information, and we'll give you all the details. But it's really a wonderful opportunity for you to actually see the results of a custom model training with your own data versus just hearing about it. And with that being said, I want to give us a few minutes here for questions. So Ron and I can make our best attempt at answering any questions that have been asked here. So let me go ahead and take a look at the questions section and see what we've got. And okay, so I got one for Ron to get started. How do you determine if it makes financial sense to localize? So maybe what was the determining factor there for you at Ariel Corp about, should we spend money to localize?
Well, especially in the energy industry, we have key markets that we need to support. And some of that, of course, is contractual, meaning, by the sale, we have to provide, service and support to those. So a lot of our translation is a business necessity. And in supporting those markets, again, like I said, we started out with, micro language sites where we only had about 20% of our content. And it really showed us quickly, hey, no, you need to be offering everything. And as I said before, then you look, well, there's all these pages that aren't used, how do you deal with those? And, that's where machine translation is a lifesaver. I mean, you can translate those and set up rules. If you have, more than 20 hits on them, you evaluate, hey, does a human need to look at this?
Absolutely. And I know this is probably a tough question, but, how have you at Ariel Corp, or how's your team measured maybe ROI of the localization process? Are you able to sort of tie in the increase in traffic to those localized country sites and increased revenue in those countries, or how do you measure that?
That's difficult, and fortunately, we don't get called upon to do that. We're very much a niche market, in a niche product in that market. So it's not like a consumer site or even a lot of the business to business sites. We have We have only certain customers, that can use these products. And we control a big part of the specialty, in our industry. We have, the highest market share in there. So that kind of affords us, really not to have, it's a necessity to get it done. So, the business looks at it as how can you do this most effectively?
Absolutely. And I'd say that those results that you saw just from your website localization probably speak for themselves to your business stakeholders, right? That the traffic is up so incredibly, and people are consuming the localized content. So that means that there was actually a desire to consume that content.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, when maybe one final question here with the time that we have left for you, Ron, is, if other companies looking at sort of improving or creating or improving their localization processes, ask you sort of your top recommendations, what would you tell them are the absolute must that they should consider?
So the top three for us were the translation management software that we got, XTM. Second, of course, was SYSTRAN with the machine translation. And third is our service provider. We use Argos Multilingual. And as a service provider, they give us everything. So I have like a whole staff of, not only translation experts, but IT experts, that can help me, do the things I need to do in both XTM and SYSTRAN.
Absolutely. So I think really the takeaway is they're choosing the right partners that are going to help you succeed, right?
Exactly.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think we're just about at time. So I want to thank you so much, Ron, for joining me here on this webinar today. It was great talking to you again about your journey and really digging into, those key elements that people should consider when looking at improving their customer experience processes and adding localization. So thank you, and I wish everyone else a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.